Welcome to Mobcrush App Test Take 2 and Pilgrim's Progress Episode 3. Um, Mobcrush is an app that is technically supposed to broadcast on all channels simultaneously. We are going to see how well that works to date. All right. Yes, over and over and over. They might also see my fears in my countenance, in my tears, and also in my trembling, under the apprehension of the judgment that did hang over our heads. But all was not sufficient to prevail with them to come with me. But what could they say for themselves why they came not? Why? My wife was afraid of losing this world, and my children were given to the foolish delights of youth. So what by one thing and what by another, they left me to wander in this manner alone. But did you not, with your vain life, damp all that you by word used by way of persuasion to bring them away with you? Indeed, I cannot commend my life, for I am conscious to myself of many failings therein. I know also that a man by his conversation may soon overthrow what by argument or persuasion he doth labor to fasten upon others for their good. Yet this I can say, I was very wary of giving them occasion, by any unseemly action, to make them averse to going on pilgrimage. Yea, for this very thing they would tell me I was too precise, and that I denied myself of things for their sakes, in which they saw no evil. Nay, I think I may say that if what they saw in me did hinder them, it was my great tenderness in sinning against God, or of doing any wrong to my neighbor. Indeed, Cain hated his brother because his own works were evil and his brother's righteousness, 1 John 3 and 12. And if thy wife and children have been offended with thee for this, they thereby show themselves to be implacable to good. And thou hast delivered thy soul from their blood, Ezekiel 3 and 19. Now I saw in my dream that thus they sat talking together until supper was ready. So when they had made ready, they sat down to meat. Now the table was furnished with fat things, and with wine that was well refined. And all their talk at the table was about the Lord of the hill, as namely about what he had done, and wherefore he did what he did, and why he had builded that house. And by what they said, I perceived that he had been a great warrior, and had fought with and slain him that had the power of death, but not without great danger to himself, which made me love him the more. Hebrews 2:14 and 15. For, as they said, and as I believe, said Christian, he did it with the loss of much blood. But that which put glory of grace into all he did was that he did it out of the pure love of his country. And besides, there were some of them of the household that said they had been and spoke with him since he did die on the cross. And they have attested that they had it from his own lips, that he is such a lover of poor pilgrims that the like is not to be found from the east to the west. They, moreover, gave an instance of what they affirmed, and that was, he had stripped himself of his glory, that he might do this for the poor, and that they heard him say and affirm that he would not dwell in the mountain of Zion alone. They said, moreover, that he had made many pilgrims princes, though by nature they were beggars born, and their original had been the dunghill. 1 Samuel 2 and 8, Psalms 113 and 7. Thus they discoursed together till late at night, and after they had committed themselves to their Lord for protection, they betook themselves to rest. The pilgrim they laid in a large upper chamber, whose window opened toward the sun rising. The name of the chamber was Peace, where he slept till the break of day, and then he awoke and sang, Where am I now? Is this the love and care of Jesus for the men that pilgrims are? Thus to provide that I should be forgiven and dwell already the next door to heaven. So in the morning they all got up, and after some more discourse, they told him that he should not depart till they had showed him the rarities of that place. And first they had him into the study, where they showed him records of the greatest antiquity, in which, as I remember my dream, they showed him first the pedigree of the Lord of the Hill, that he was a son of the Ancient of Days, and came by the eternal generation. Here also was more fully recorded the acts that he had done, and the names of many hundreds that he had taken into his service, and how he had placed them in such habitations that could neither be by length of days nor decays of nature be dissolved. Then they read to him some of the worthy acts that some of his servants had done, as how they had subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fires, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, and turned to fight the armies of the aliens. Hebrews 11:33 and 34. They then read again in another part of the records of the house what it was showed how willing their Lord was to receive into his favor any, even any, though they in time past had offered great affronts to his persons and proceedings. Here also were several other histories of many other famous things, of all which Christian had a view, as of things both ancient and modern, together with prophecies and predictions of things that have their certain accomplishment, both to the dread and amazement of enemies, and the comfort and solace of pilgrims. The next day they took him and had him into the armory, where they showed him all manner of furniture which their Lord had provided for pilgrims, as sword, shield, helmet, breastplate, all prayer, and shoes that would not wear out. And there was here enough of this to harness out as many men for the service of their Lord as there be stars in the heaven for multitude. They also showed him some of the engines with which some of his servants had done wonderful things. They showed him Moses' rod, the hammer and nail with which Jael slew Sisera, the pitchers, trumpets, and lamps too, with which Gideon put to flight the armies of Midian. Then they showed him the ox goad wherewith Shamgar slew 600 men. They showed him also the jawbone with which Samson did such mighty feat. They showed him moreover the sling and stone with which David slew Goliath of Gath, and the sword also with which their Lord will kill the man of sin in the day that he shall rise up to the prey. They showed him besides many excellent things with which Christian was much delighted. This done, they went to their rest again. Then I saw in my dream that on the morrow he got up to go forward, but they desired him to stay till the next day also. And then said they, we will, if the day be clear, show you the delectable mountains, which they said would yet further add to his comfort, because they were nearer the desired haven than the place where at present he was. So he consented and stayed. When the morning was up, they had him to the top of the house, and bid him look south. So he did. And behold, at a great distance he saw a most pleasant mountainous country, beautified with woods, vineyards, fruits of all sorts, flowers also, with springs and fountains, very delectable to behold. Isaiah 33:16 and 17. Then he asked the name of the country. They said it was Emmanuel's land. And it is as common, said they, as this hill is, to and for all the pilgrims. And when thou comest there from thence, said they, thou mayest see to the gate of the celestial city, as the shepherds that live there will make appear. Now he bethought himself of setting forward, and they were willing he should. But first, said they, let us go again into the armory. So they did. And when they came there, they harnessed him from head to foot, with what was of proof, lest perhaps he should meet with assaults in the way. He being, therefore, thus accoutred, walked out with his friends to the gate, and there he asked the porter if he saw any pilgrims pass by. Then the porter answered, pray, did you know him? Said he. I asked him his name, and he told me it was Faithful. Oh, said Christian, I know him. He is my townsman, my near neighbor. He comes from the place where I was born. How far do you think he may be before? He has got by this time below the hill. Well, said Christian, good porter, the Lord be with you, and add to all thy blessings much increase, for the kindness that thou hast shown to me. Then he began to go forward, but discretion, piety, charity, and prudence would accompany him down to the foot of the hill. So they went on together, reiterating their former discourses, till they came to go down the hill. Then said Christian, as it was difficult coming up, so far as I can see, it is dangerous going down. Yes, said Prudence, so it is, for it is a hard matter for a man to go down into the valley of humiliation as thou art now, and to catch no slip by the way. Therefore, said they, are we come out to accompany thee down the hill. So he began to go down, but very warily, yet he caught a slip or two. Then I saw in my dream that these good companions, when Christian was going to the bottom of the hill, gave him a loaf of bread, a bottle of wine, and a cluster of raisins, and then he went on his way. But now, in this valley of humiliation, poor Christian was hard put to it, for he had gone but a little way before he had spied a foul fiend coming out the field to meet him. His name is Apollyon. Then did Christian begin to be afraid, and to cast in his mind whether to go back or to stand his ground. But he considered again that he had no armor for his back, and therefore thought that to turn the back to him might give him the greater advantage with ease to pierce him with his darts. Therefore he resolved to venture and stand his ground, for, thought he, had I no more in mine eye than the saving of my life, it would be the best way to stand. So he went on, and Apollyon met him. Now the monster was hideous to behold. He was clothed with scales like a fish, and, they are his pride, he had wings like a dragon, feet like a bear, and out of his belly came fire and smoke, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion. When he was come up to Christian, he beheld him with disdainful countenance, and thus began to question with him, Whence cometh you, and whither are you bound? I am come from the city of destruction, which is the place of all evil, and I am going to the city of Zion. By this I perceive thou art one of my subjects, for all that country is mine, and I am the prince and guide of it. How is it, then, that thou hast run away from thy king? Were it not that I hope thou mayest do me more service, I would strike thee now at one blow to the ground. I was born, indeed, in your dominions, but your service was hard, and your wages such as a man could not live on. For the wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. Therefore, when I was come to years, I did, as others considerate persons do, look out, if perhaps I might mend myself. There is no prince that will thus lightly lose his subjects, neither will I as yet lose thee. But since thou complainest of thy service and wages, be content to go back. What our country will afford, I do here promise to give thee. But as I have let myself to another, even to the king of princes, and how can I, with fairness, go back with thee? Thou hast done in this, according to the proverb, changed a bad for a worse. But it is ordinarily for those that have professed themselves his servants, after a while to give him the slip and return again to me. Do thou so too, and all shall be well. I have given him my faith, and sworn my allegiance to him. How then can I go back from this, and not be hanged as a traitor? Thou didst the same to me, and yet I am willing to pass by all, if now thou wilt yet turn again and go back. What I promised thee was in my nonage, And besides, I count the prince under whose banner now I stand is able to absolve me, yea, and to pardon also what I did as to my compliance with thee. And besides, O thou destroying Apollyon, to speak truth, I like his service, his wages, his service, his government, his company and country better than thine, and therefore leave off to persuade me further. I am his servant, and I will follow him. Consider again, when thou art in cool blood, what thou art like to meet with in the way that thou goest. Thou knowest that, for the most part, his servants come to an ill end, because they are transgressors against me in my ways. Many of them have been put to shameful deaths. And, besides, thou countest his service better than mine, whereas he never came yet from that place where he is to deliver any that served him out of their hands. But as for me, how many times, as all the world very well knows, have I delivered, either by power or fraud, those that have faithfully served me from him and his. Thou taken by them, and so I will deliver thee. His forbearing at present to deliver them is on purpose to try their love, whether they will cleave to him to the end. And as for the ill end thou sayest they come to, that is most glorious in their account. For present deliverance they do not much expect it, for they stay for their glory, and then they shall have it when their prince comes in his, and the glory of the angels. Thou hast already been unfaithful in thy service to him, and how dost thou think to receive wages of him? Wherein, O Apollyon, have I been unfaithful to him? Thou didst faint at first setting out, when thou was almost choked in the gulf of despond. Thou didst attempt wrong ways to be rid of thy burden, whereas thou should have stayed till the prince have taken it off. Thou didst sinfully sleep and lose thy choice thing. Thou wast also almost persuaded to go back at the sight of the lions. And when thou talkest of thy journey and of what thou hast heard and seen, thou art inwardly desirous of vainglory in all that thou sayest or doest. All this is true, and much more which thou hast left out. But the prince whom I serve and honor is merciful and ready to forgive. But besides, these infirmities possess me in thy country, for there I sucked them in, and I have grown under them, been sorry for them, and have attained pardon of my prince. Then Apollyon broke out into a grievous rage, saying, I am an enemy to this prince. I hate his person, his laws, and his people. I am come out on purpose to withstand thee. Apollyon, beware what you do, for I am in the king's highway, the way of holiness. Therefore, take heed to yourself. Then Apollyon straddled quite over the whole breadth of the way and said, I am void of fear in this matter. Prepare thyself to die, for I swear by my infernal den that thou shalt go no further. Here will I spill thy soul. And with that he threw a flaming dart at his breast. But Christian had a shield in his hand, with which he caught it, and so prevented the danger of that. Then did Christian draw, for he saw it was time to bestir him, and Apollyon as fast made at him, throwing darts as thick as hail, by the which, notwithstanding all that Christian could do to avoid it, Apollyon wounded him in his head, his hand, and foot. This made Christian give a little back. Apollyon therefore followed his work amain, and Christian again took courage and resisted as manfully as he could. This sore combat lasted for about half a day, even till Christian was almost quite spent. For you must know that Christian, by reason of his wounds, must needs grow weaker and weaker. Then Apollyon, espying his opportunity, began to gather up close to Christian, and wrestling with him, gave him a dreadful fall, And with that Christian's sword flew out of his hand. Then said Apollyon, I am sure of thee now. And with that he had almost pressed him to death, so that Christian began to despair of life. But as God would have it, while Apollyon was fetching of his last blow, thereby to make a full end of this good man, Christian nimbly stretched out his hand for his sword and caught it, saying, Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. Micah 7:8. And with that gave him a deadly thrust, which made him give back as one that has received his mortal wound. Christian, perceiving that, made at him again, saying, Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. Romans 8:37. And with that Apollyon spread forth his dragon wings and sped him away, that Christian for a season saw him no more. James 4:7. In this combat no man can imagine, unless he had seen and heard as I did, what yelling and hideous roaring Apollyon made all the time of the fight. He spake like a dragon, and on the other side, what sighs and groans burst from Christian's heart. I never saw him all the while give so much as one pleasant look, till he perceived he had wounded Apollyon with his two-edged sword. Then indeed he did smile and look upward, but it was the dreadfulness sight that ever I saw. A more unequal match can hardly be. Christian must fight an angel, but you see, the valiant man by handling sword and shield doth make him though a dragon quit the field. So when the battle was over, Christian said, I will here give thanks to him that delivered me out of the mouth of the lion, to him that did help me against Apollyon. And so he did, saying, Great Beelzebub, the captain of this fiend, designed my ruin. Therefore to this end he sent him harnessed out, and he with rage that hellish was, did fiercely me engage. But blessed Michael helped me, and I by dint of sword did quickly make him fly. Therefore to him let me give lasting praise, and thank and bless his holy name always. Then there came to him a hand, with some of the leaves of the trees of life, the which Christian took, and applied to the wounds that he received in battle, and was healed immediately. He also sat down in that place to eat bread, and to drink of the bottle that was given him a little before. So, being refreshed, he addressed himself to his journey, with his sword drawn in his hand, for he said, I know not but some other enemy may be at hand. But he met with no other affront from Apollyon quite through this valley. Now at the end of this valley was another, called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. And Christian must need go through it, because the way to the celestial city lay through the midst of it. Now this valley is a very solitary place. The prophet Jeremiah thus described it, a wilderness, a land of deserts and of pits, a land of drought, and of the shadow of death, a land that no man, but a Christian, passeth through, and where no man dwelt. Jeremiah 2:6. Now here Christian was worse put to it than in his fight with Apollyon, as by the sequel you shall see. I saw then, in my dream, that when Christian was got to the borders of the shadow of death, there met him two men, children of them that brought up an evil report of the good land, Numbers 13, making haste to go back, to whom Christian spake as follows, Whither are you going? They said, Back, back, and we would have you to do so too, if either life or peace is prized by you. Why? What's the matter? Said Christian. Matter? Said they. We were going that way as you are going, and went as far as we durst, and indeed we were almost past coming back. For had we gone a little further, we had not been here to bring the news to thee. But what have you met with? Said Christian. Why, we were almost in the valley of the shadow of death, but that, by good hap, we looked before thee, and saw the danger before we came to it. Psalms 43:19, 107 and 10. But what have you seen? Said Christian. Seen? Why, the valley itself, which is as dark as pitch. We also saw that there are the hobgoblins, the satyrs, the dragons of the pit, where there are also in the valley a continual howling and yelling, as of people under an unutterable misery, who there sat bound in affliction and irons, and over the valley hangs a discouraging cloud of confusion. Death also doth always spread his wings over it. In a word, it is every whit dreadful, being utterly without order. Job 3 and 5, 10 and 22. Then said Christian, I perceive not yet by what you have said, but that this is my way to the desired haven. Jeremiah 2 and 6. Be it thy way. We will not choose it for ours. So they parted, and Christian went on his way, but still with his sword drawn in his hand, for fear lest he should be assaulted. I saw then in my dream, so far as this valley reached, there was on the rich hand a very deep ditch. That ditch is it into which the blind have led the blind in all ages, and have both their misery perished. Psalm 69, 14 and 15. Again, behold, on the left hand there was a very dangerous quag, into which if even a good man falls, he can find no bottom for his foot to stand on. Into that quag King David once did fall, and had no doubt therein been smothered, had not he that is able plucked him out. The pathway was here also exceeding narrow, and therefore good Christian was the more put to it. For when he sought in the dark to shun the ditch on the one hand, he was ready to tip over into the mire on the other. Also when he sought to escape the mire without great carefulness, he would be ready to fall into the ditch. Thus he went on, and I heard him here sigh bitterly, for besides the dangers mentioned above, the pathway was here so dark, and oftentimes when he lifted up his foot to set forward, he knew not where and upon what he should set it next. Poor man, where art thou now? Thy day is night. Good man, be not thou cast down. Thou yet art right. The way to heaven lies by the gates of hell. Cheer up, hold out, and with thee it shall go well. Above the midst of this valley I perceived the mouth of hell to be, and it stood also hard by the wayside. Now thought Christian, what shall I do? And ever and anon the flame and smoke would come out in such abundance, with sparks and hideous noises, things that cared not for Christian's swords, as did Apollyon before, that he was forced to put up his sword, and betake himself to another weapon called all prayer. Ephesians 6 and 18. So he cried in my hearing, O Lord, I beseech thee, deliver my soul. Psalms 116 and 4. Then he went on a great while. Yet still the flames would be reaching towards him. Also he heard doleful voices and rushings to and fro, so that sometimes he thought he should be torn in pieces or trodden down like mire in the streets. This frightful sight was seen, and those dreadful noises were heard by him for several miles together, and coming to a place where he thought he heard a company of fiends coming forward to meet him, he stopped and began to muse what he had best to do. Sometimes he had half a thought to go back. Then again he thought he might be halfway through the valley. He remembered also he had already vanquished many a danger, and that the danger of going back might be much more than for to go forward. So he resolved to go on. Yet the fiends seemed to come nearer and nearer, but when they were come even almost at him, he cried out with a most vehement voice, I will walk in the strength of the Lord God. So they gave back and came no further. One thing I would not let slip. I took notice that now poor Christian was so confounded that he did not know his own voice, and thus I perceived it. Just when he was come over against the mouth of the burning pit, one of the wicked ones got behind him and stepped up softly to him, and whisperingly suggested many grievous blasphemies to him, which he verily thought had proceeded from his own mind. This put Christian more to it than anything that he met with before, even to think that he should now blaspheme him that with sorry about that, and whispers suggest many grievous blasphemies to him, which he verily thought had proceeded from his own mind. This pushed Christian more to it than anything that he met with before, even to think that he should now blaspheme him that he loved so much before. Yet, if he could have helped it, he would not have done it. But he had not the discretion either to stop his ears or to know from whence these blasphemies come. When Christian had traveled in this disconsolate condition some considerable time, he thought he heard the voice of a man as going before him, saying, Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Psalms 23 and 4. Then he was glad, and that for these reasons. First, because he gathered from thence that some who feared God were in this valley as well as himself. Secondly, for that he perceived God was with them, though in that dark and dismal state, and why not, thought he, with me? Though by reason of the impediment that attends this place I cannot perceive it. Job 9 and 11. Thirdly, for that he hoped, could he overtake them, to have company by and by. So he went on, and called to him that was before. But he knew not what to answer, for that he also thought to be alone. And by the day broke. Then said Christian, He hath turned the shadow of death into the morning. Amos 5 and 8. Now morning being come, he looked back, not out of desire to return, but to see by the light of the day what hazards he had gone through in the dark. So he was more perfectly the ditch that was on the one hand, and the mire that was on the other. Also how narrow the way was which led betwixt them both. Also now he saw the hobgoblins and satyrs and dragons of the pit, but all afar off, for after the break of day they came not nigh. Yet they were discovered to him, according to that which is written. He discovered deep things out of the darkness, and bringeth out to light the shadow of death. Job 12 and 22. Now was Christian much affected with his deliverances from all the dangers of his solitary way, which dangers, though he feared them more before, yet he saw them more clearly now, because the light of the day made them conspicuous to him. And about this time the sun was rising, and this was another mercy to Christian. For you must know that though the first part of the valley of the shadow of death was dangerous, yet this second part, which he was yet to go, was, if possible, far more dangerous. For from the place where he now stood, even to the end of the valley, the way was all along, and so full of snares, traps, gins, and nets here, and so full of pits, pitfalls, deep holes, and shelvings down there, that had it now been dark as it was when he came to the first part of the way, had he had 1,000 souls, they had in reason been cast away. But as I said just now, the sun was rising. Then said he, His candle shineth upon my head, and by his light I walk through darkness. Job 29 and 3. In this light, therefore, he came to the end of the valley. Now I saw in my dream that at the end of this valley lay blood, bones, ashes, and mangled bodies of men, even of pilgrims that had gone this way formerly. And while I was musing what should be the reason, I espied a little before me a cave, where two giants, Pope and Pagan, dwelt in old time, by whose power and tyranny the men whose bones, blood, and ashes and company lay there were cruelly put to death. But by this place Christian went without much danger, whereat I somewhat wondered, but I have learned since that Pagan had been dead many a day. And as for the other, though he be yet alive, he is by reason of age, and also of the many shrewd brushes that he met with in his younger days, grown so crazy and stiff in his joints, that he can now do little more than sit in his cave's mouth, grinning at pilgrims as they go by, and biting his nails because he cannot come at them. So I saw that Christian went on his way. Yet, at the sight of the old man that sat in the mouth of the cave, he could not tell what to think, especially because he spake to him, though he could not go after him, saying, You will never mend until more of you be burned. But he held his peace, and set a good face on it, and so went by and catched no hurt. Then sang Christian, O world of wonders, I can say no less, that I should be preserved in that distress that I have met with here. O blessed be that hand that from it hath delivered me. Dangers and darkness, devils, hell, and sin did compass me, while I this vale was in. Yea, snares and pits and traps and nets did lie my path about, that worthless, silly I might have been catched, entangled, and cast down. But since I live, let Jesus wear the crown. Now as Christian went on his way, he came to a little ascent, which was cast out on purpose that pilgrims might see before them. Up there, therefore, Christian went and looked forward. He saw Faithful before him upon his journey. Then said Christian aloud, Ho, ho, so ho, stay, and I will be your companion. At that Faithful looked behind him, to whom Christian cried again, Stay, stay, till I come up to you. But Faithful answered, No, I am upon my life, and the avenger of blood is behind me. At this Christian was somewhat moved, and putting to all his strength, he quickly got up with Faithful, and did also overrun him, so that the last was first. Then did Christian vaingloriously smile, because he had gotten the start of his brother, but not taking good heed to his feet, he suddenly stumbled and fell, and could not rise again until Faithful came up to help him. Then I saw in my dream they went very lovingly on together, and had sweet discourse of all the things that had happened to them in their pilgrimage. And thus Christian began, My honored and well-beloved brother, Faithful, I am glad that I have overtaken you, and that God has so tempered our spirits that we can walk as companions in this so pleasant a path. I had thought, dear friend, to have had your company quite from our town, but you did get the start of me, wherefore I was forced to come thus much of the way alone. How long did you stay in this city of destruction before you set out after me on your pilgrimage? Till I could stay no longer, for there was great talk presently after you were gone out that our city would in short time with fire from heaven be burned down to the ground. What? Did your neighbors talk so? Yes. It was for a while in everybody's mouth. What? And did no more of them but you come out to escape danger? Though there was, as I said, a great talk thereabout, yet I do not think they did firmly believe it. For in the heat of the discourse I heard some of them deridingly speak of you and of your desperate journey, for so they called this your pilgrimage. But I did believe, and do still, that the end of our city will be with fire and brimstone from above, and therefore I have made my escape. Did you hear no talk of neighbor Pliable? Yes, Christian. I heard that he followed you till he came at the Slough of Despond, whereas some said he fell in, but he would not be known to have so done, but I am sure he was soundly bedabbled with that kind of dirt. And what said the neighbors to him? He hath since his going back been had greatly in derision, and that among all sorts of people some do mock and despise him, and scarce will any set him on work. He is now 7 times worse than if he had never gone out of the city. But why should they be so set against him, since they also despise the way that he forsook? Oh, they say, hang him, he is a turncoat. He was not true to his profession. I think God has stirred up even his enemies to hiss at him, and make him a proverb, because he has forsaken the way. Jeremiah 29:18 and 19. Had you no talk with him before you came out? I met him once in the streets, but he leered away on the other side as one ashamed of what he had done, so I spake not to him. Well, at my first setting out, I had hopes of that man, but now I fear he will perish in the overthrow of the city, for it is happening to him according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. 2 Peter 2 and 22. These are my fears of him too. But who can hinder that which will be? Well, neighbor faithful, said Christian, let us leave him and talk of things that more immediately concern us. Tell me now, what you have met in the way as you came, for I know you have met with some things, or else it may be writ for a wonder. I escaped the slough that I perceived you fell into, and got up to the gate without that danger. Only I met with one whose name was Wanton, who had like to have done me a mischief. It is well that you escaped her net. Joseph was hard put to it by her, and he escaped her as you did. But it had like to have cost him his life. Genesis 39:11-13. But what did she do to you? You cannot think but that you know something, what a flattering tongue she had. She had laid me hard to turn aside with her, promising all manner of content. Nay, she did not promise you the content of a good conscience. You know what I mean, all carnal and fleshly content. Thank God you have escaped her. The abhorred of the Lord shall fall into her ditch. Psalms 22:14. Nay, I know not whether I did wholly escape her or no. Why, I trow, you did not consent to her desire? No, not to defile myself, for I remembered an old writing that I had seen which said, her steps take hold on hell, Proverbs 5:5. So I shut mine eyes, because I would not be bewitched with her looks, Job's 31:1. Then she rallied on me, railed on me, and I went my way. Did you meet with no other assault as you came? When I came to the foot of the hill called Difficulty, I met with a very aged man, who asked me what I was, and whither bound. I told him that I am a pilgrim going to the celestial city. Then said the old man, thou lookest like an honest fellow. Wilt thou be content to dwell with me for the wages that I shall give thee? Then I asked him his name and where he dwelt. He said his name was Adam the first, and that he dwelt in the town of Deceit. Ephesians 4:22. Sorry. I asked him then what was his work, and what the wages he would give. He told me that his work was many delights, and that in his wages that I should be his heir at last. I further asked him what house he kept, and what other servants he had. So he told me that his house was maintained with all the dainties in the world, and that his servants were those of his own begetting. Then I asked if he had any children. He said that he had but 3 daughters, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, and that I should marry them all if I would. 1 John 2:16. Then I asked how long he would have me live with him, and he told me as long as he lived himself. Well, and what conclusion came the old man and you to at last? Why, at first I found myself somewhat inclinable to go with the man, for I thought he spake very fair. But looked in his forehead as I talked with him, I saw there written, put off the old man with his deeds. And how then? Then it came burning hot into my mind, whatever he said and however he flattered, when he got me home to his house he would sell me for a slave. So I bid him forbear to talk, for I would not come near the door of his house. Then he reviled me and told me that he would send such a one after me that should make me way bitter to my soul. So I turned to go away from him, but just as I turned myself to go thence, I felt him take hold of my flesh and give me such a deadly twitchback that I thought he had pulled part of me after himself. This made me cry, O wretched man, Romans 7:24. So I went on my way up the hill. Now when I had got about halfway up, I looked behind and saw one coming after me, swift as the wind. So he overtook me just about the place where the settle stands. Just there, said Christian, did I sit down to rest me. But being overcome with sleep, I there lost this roll out of my bosom. But, good brother, hear me out. So soon as the man overtook me, he was but a word and a blow, for down he knocked me and laid me for dead. But when I was a little come to myself again, I asked him wherefore he served me so. He said, because of my secret inclining to Adam the first, and with that he struck another deadly blow on the breast, and beat me down backwards, so I lay at his foot as dead as before. So when I came to myself again, I cried, I cried him mercy, but he said, I know not how to show mercy. And with that he knocked me down again. He had doubtless made an end of me, but that one came by and bid him forbear. Who was that bid him forbear? I did not know him at first, but as he went by, I perceived the holes in his hands and in his side. Then I concluded that he was our Lord, so I went up the hill. That man that overtook you was Moses. He spareth none, neither knoweth he how to show mercy to those that transgress his law. I know it very well. It was not the first time that he has met me with me. It was he that came to me when I dwelt securely at home, and that told me he would burn my house over my head if I stayed there. But did you not see the house which stood there on the top of the hill on the side of which Moses met you? Yes, and the lions too, before I came at it. But for the lions I think they were asleep, for it was about noon, and because I had so much of the day before me, I passed by the porter and came down the hill. He told me indeed that he saw you go by, but I wish you had called at the house, for they would have showed you so many rarities that you would scarce have forgotten them to the day of your death. But pray tell me, did you meet nobody in the valley of humility? Yes, I met with one discontent, who would willingly have persuaded me to go back again with him. His reason was for that the valley was altogether without honor. He told me, moreover, that there to go was the way to disobey all my friends, his pride, arrogancy, self-conceit, worldly glory, and with others, who he knew, as he said, would be very much offended if I made such a fool of myself as to wade through this valley. Well, and how did you answer him? I told him that although all these that he named might claim kindred of me, and that rightly, for indeed they were my relations according to the flesh, yet since I became a pilgrim, they have disowned me, as I have also rejected them, and therefore they were to me now no more than if they had never been of my lineage. I told him, moreover, that as to this valley, he had quite misrepresented the thing, for before honor is humility, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Therefore, said I had rather go through this valley to the honor that was so accounted by the wisest, than choose that which he esteemed most worthy our affections. Met you with nothing else in that valley? Yes, I met with shame. But of all the men that I met with in my pilgrimage, he, I think, bears the wrong name. The others would be said nay, after a little argumentation, and somewhat else, but this bold-faced shame would never have done. Why? What did he say to you? What? Why, he objected against religion itself. He said it was a pitiful, low, sneaking business for a man to mind religion. He said that a tender conscience was an unmanly thing, and that for a man to watch over his words and ways, so as to tie up himself from that hectoring liberty that the brave spirits of the time accustomed themselves unto, would make him the ridicule of the times. He objected also that but few of the mighty, rich or wise, were ever, to my opinion, 1 Corinthians 1 and 26, 3 and 18, Philippians 3, 7 and 8, nor any of them neither, John 7:48, before they were persuaded to be fools, and to be of a voluntary fondness to venture the lost of all, for nobody knows what. He, moreover, objected the base and low estate and conditions of those that were chiefly the pilgrims of the times in which they live, also their ignorance and want of understanding and all natural silence. Yea, he did hold me to it at that rate also, about a great many more things than here I relate, as that it was a shame to sit whining and mourning under a sermon, and a shame to come sighing and groaning home. That it was a shame to ask my neighbor's forgiveness for petty faults, or to make restitution where I may have taken from any. He said also that religion made a man grow strange to the great because of a few vices which he called by finer names, and made him own and respect the base because of the same religious fraternity. And is not this, said he, a shame? And what did you say to him? Say? I could not tell what to say at the first. Yea, he put me so to it that my blood came up in my face. Even this shame fetched it up, and he had almost beat me quite off. But at last I began to consider that that which is highly esteemed among men is had in abomination with God. Luke 16 and 15. And I thought again, this shame tells me what men are, but it tells me nothing what God or the Word of God is. And I thought, moreover, that at the day of doom we shall not be doomed to death or life according to the hectoring spirits of the world, but according to the wisdom and the law of the highest. Therefore, thought I, what God says is best, indeed is best, though all the men in the world are against it. Seeing then that God prefers his religion, seeing God prefers a tender conscience, seeing that maketh themselves fools for the kingdom of heaven are wisest, and that the poor man that loveth Christ is richer than the greatest man in the world that hates him, shame depart, thou art an enemy to my salvation. Shall I entertain thee against my sovereign Lord? How then shall I look him in the face at his coming? Should I now be ashamed of his ways and servants? How can I expect a blessing? Mark 8 and 38. But, indeed, this shame was a bold villain. I could scarce shake him out of my company. Yea, he would be haunting of me and continue whispering of me in the ear with some one or the other of the infirmities that attend religion. But at last I told him it was but in vain to attempt further in this business. For those things that he disdained, in those did I see most glory. And so at last I got past this importune one. And when I had shaken him off, then I began to sing. The trials that those men do meet withal, that are obedient to the heavenly call, are manifold and suited to the flesh, and come and come and come again afresh, that now or sometimes else we by them may be taken, overcome, and cast away. Oh, let the pilgrims then be vigilant and quit themselves like men. I am glad, my brother, that thou didst withstand this villain so bravely. For above all, as thou sayest, I think he has the wrong name. For he is so bold as to follow us in the streets, and to attempt to put us to shame before all men, that is, to make us ashamed of that which is good. But if he was not himself audacious, he would never attempt to do as he does. But let us still resist him, for notwithstanding all his bravadoes, he promoteth the fool and none else. The wise shall inherit glory, said Solomon, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. Proverbs 3 and 35. I think we must cry to him for help against shame, who would have us to be valiant for the truth upon the earth. You say true, but did you meet nobody else in the valley? No, not I, for I had sunshine all the rest of the way through that, and also through the valley of the shadow of death. It was well for you. I am sure it had fared far otherwise with me, for I had for a long season, as soon almost as I entered into that valley, a dreadful combat with that foul fiend Apollyon. Yea, I thought verily he would have killed me, especially when he got me down and crushed me under him, as if he would have crushed me to pieces. For as he threw me, my sword flew out of my hand. Nay, he told me he was sure of me, but I cried to God, and he heard me and delivered me out of all my troubles. Then I entered into the valley of the shadow of death, and had no light for almost half the way through it. I thought I should have been killed there, over and over, but at long last broke, and the sun rose, and I went through that which was behind with far more ease and quiet. Moreover, I saw in my dream that as they went on, faithful, as he chanced to look on one side, saw a man whose name is Talkative walking at a distance beside them, for in this place there was room enough for them all to walk. He was a tall man, and something more comely at a distance than at hand. To this man Faithful addressed himself in this manner: Friend, whither away? Are you going to the heavenly country? I am going to the same place. That is well. Then I hope we may have your good company. With a very good will I be your companion. Come on then, and let us go together, and let us spend our time in discoursing of things that are profitable. To talk of things that are good to me is very acceptable with you or with any other, and I'm glad that I've met with those that incline to so good a work. For to speak the truth, there are but few that care thus to spend their time, as there are in their travels, but choose more rather to be speaking of things to no profit, and this hath been a trouble for me. All right, this is the end of part three, and we will see if the app is worth its grain of salt. Be well, be safe, be the best you that you can be.